This is still very early to come to categorical conclusions. But what Foreign Minister Jaishankar recently said just 2 days back was that some of the security concerns which India had regarding its diplomatic missions in Canada have been addressed, and that's the most proximate cause. But there is also some sense in India that this needs to be dialed down a bit. There may be also, pressure from the Five Eyes allies. So there can be a number of factors which have contributed to this decision by the Indian government.
How big an impact has this spat had on consular services in both countries?
Yes, because Canada had to downsize its mission by almost 41 diplomats, what it has direct implications for, are in-person consular, services provided by the Canadian Embassy, particularly in three consulates in Chandigarh, Bangalore, and Mumbai. So this would have a lot of implication for visas as well as immigration from India to Canada.
Can you tell us a bit more about what Canada accused India of and how it's affected diplomatic ties between the two countries?
Right. So Canada, Prime Minister Trudeau on the House of the, on the floor of the Parliament in early September, accused India of the Indian government involvement in killing of a Sikh separatist leader, Mr. Nijjar, on Canadian soil. So practically, what India was being accused of was an extraterritorial assassination of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. And that has not been very well received in India. It literally led to a breakdown of India-Canada diplomatic relations. But what was appalling for India was that these allegations were made publicly by the Prime Minister on the floor of the House, even when, as Canadian authorities would say, that they had informed the Indian government and were discussing, these allegations even before, Prime Minister's accusations and during and even before the G20 summit. So that has literally created a major rift in India-Canada relations.
Where are relations at now then? Do you think Canada will continue to pursue the murder investigations, or do you think they'll just let it slide for a little while?
So what is very important in this case is that it's very, very difficult to prove, these kind of allegations. And what Prime Minister Trudeau himself said was, credible allegations. So it's not very clear what kind of empirical evidence they can bring to the public, particularly because since the intelligence has been sourced from Five Eyes network, and it is very difficult to bring these intelligence sources out in the public. But having said that, I also think that Prime Minister Trudeau and the Liberal government is blowing both hot and cold at the same time, right? At some point in time, Canadian diplomats would say that we want to pursue this, not in front of the public. And at another time, Prime Minister Trudeau, for his domestic political reasons, would blow this out of context. So in a sense that the Liberal government and the Liberal Party are acting at odds with one another. Canada's position in that sense with the larger Five Eyes network, when you look at that, the rest of the four countries have very important diplomatic and geopolitical relations with India. And in some sense, there has been some pessimism in Canada that the allies have really not gathered together in support of Canada.
And has the diplomatic stoush had a knock-on effect on trade and tourism between the two countries?
So the trade is minuscule at this point in time. It's just $8 billion. But the Indian government has restricted its actions to just diplomatic services, particularly the issuing of visas to Canada, but also asking Canadian High Commission to downsize the size of the mission. But the trade, I don't think so, has been impacted so far. There are no reports which indicate that India has cut down on its imports, particularly agricultural imports from Canada. So we haven't seen that. On the other hand, Canada has put on hold a major trade deal with India The damage is still restricted. It's much more about public lashing and rhetorical at this stage, and at the level of at the diplomatic level. But we haven't seen a lot of repercussions in terms of trade.
And at this stage, a neighbouring United States has no interest in choosing sides in this particular spat.
Obviously, U.S. has a major interest in India as a counterweight to China. U.S. Indo-Pacific policy puts premium on India's rise. So they have major national interests at stake. On the other hand, it is also about the Five Eyes network as well as alliance dynamics within the Anglo-Saxon alliance. Insofar as we can see, they have made some rhetorical statements regarding India to come clean and all of that. But we haven't seen a lot of repercussion on India-US relations, but even India's relations with Australia, for that matter, or Japan. In fact, when Canada proposed that India G7 should come out on a statement with India, some of the G7 countries basically said that they won't really contribute to any public lashing of India.
Dr. Yogesh Joshi, thank you so much for talking to us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. Have a good one.